where they grow. Beautiful. Y'all are the best. All right, well, in coffee hour, I want to hear what you think about that song. It's one of my all-time favorite songs. I love it so much, and boy, do I wrestle with it, because I want to believe that wildflowers can always survive. Our congregation is wildflowers, and I think of us all as UUs a bit as wildflowers, and at the same time, no. I don't think people can just survive anywhere under any conditions. We see that as our folks are making their way to the United States. We see that in our call from our trans siblings. We see that when people are struggling with depression or suicide. We need each other. We need a certain kind of fertile ground. And so I love the spirit of that song, and I think for it to be true, we have to make it true. So, should we take just a couple of breaths together? Thank you. So I'm going to be talking about some hard things today. I am a joy-centered person, and talking about hard things is not my favorite. But one of the great things about being a minister is that sense of calling. And I have been feeling called, certainly for the past year, to really talk about some difficult things, issues around mental health and how we take care of each other, depression, suicide. And I feel called by the news and by the greater world about that. I feel called by things in my own family. And I know that as I talk about this, there will be those of you for whom it is also really hard to think about and hear about these things, either because it's personal for you or other reasons. And so we breathed together because I want us to remember that. As the topics are hard, take care of yourself, listen to your body, breathe along the way, notice what's coming up for you. And remember this, which I take from Reverend Soto, who I mentioned earlier. We can do hard things. We can do hard things. Now, before we do hard things, I'm going to share a fun story first about karaoke. Does anybody here do karaoke ever? Do we have any karaoke enthusiasts? Okay, and then everyone else, it's like terrifying, right? You're also mortified for those of us who like it, aren't you? So I will never forget the one and only time that I met Anthony Bourdain. Do you all know who that is? So he was a celebrity chef and traveler, and really made it his business to kind of open up the world to people through his shows. And he died by suicide this year. But when I met Anthony, which was about 2.5 years ago, he was hosting a live band karaoke contest at South by Southwest in Austin. So this is not just machines with your friends in a small room. This is, you're on a stage, you're fronting a band full of strangers. They know the songs. You pick a song to sing. A crowd of people with cell phones and the internet who could put you online at any minute are in front of you. And I was abnormally anxious and honestly almost physically sick about the fact that I was a contestant in this contest. A friend had drafted me into it. I had actually never seen one of Anthony Bourdain's shows at all, but I knew that chefs had a reputation for being macho and yelling a lot in the kitchen. And since he was I thought he was a British TV host, but maybe he's not. I've since Googled it. Don't ask me why, but I had turned him into Simon Cowell. In my mind, he was a version of Simon Cowell. And he got up there on stage and he said right off the bat, or the person who introduced him said, he hated karaoke. So I was like, why is he hosting this and why is he judging this? I was so scared. And I was also at a low point in my own self-esteem, a low point in my own confidence, related to body image, a lot of the things that are pervasive, particularly with women, no matter how well life is going. Those messages are often just in there. And so I definitely had never been so anxious, except the time, maybe it was a tie, with when I saw the Ministerial Fellowship Committee in Boston. That's it. I had nothing to compare this level of fear to. And so a year later, after this contest happened, I wrote an article about it for the Austin American-Statesman newspaper. And the title was, and I didn't give it this title, but it's fairly accurate, How to Find Your Joy and Conquer Your Fears at South by Southwest with Karaoke. It's a very long title. It's kind of like Unitarian Universalist Community Minister. But I went back and I read it again when the sad news came around that Anthony Bourdain had died. And in that piece, I write about that feeling of not being good enough, and then having won the contest, which I did, and that darkest before the dawn, I have stories for you, darkest before the dawn feeling, right, where you push yourself through deep fear or insecurity, and there's some incredible experience on the other side. And I want to tell you why I won, and then we're going to talk about the hard things. For 2 reasons. Neither of which had anything to do with best singing. I was not the best singer in this group. The first one was that when I got my first song, the rules of live band karaoke are that you never repeat a song. If someone else has already sung it, it's like a concert for a band. They would never play the same song twice. So if someone sang your song, you don't get to sing that song. For whatever reason, they brought me up there, they put my song on that someone else had already sang. And so I was just like, I didn't know what to do. So I got up there and I took the microphone and I went with vulnerability. This is what they teach you in ministry. And I just went with it. And I was like, I'm so scared. And there were some curse words, and I just like let it out. And the people just went crazy. They were so amazed to see someone just say that in front of them. So they were with me now. So it was amazing. If you ever are scared, just tell people how scared you are, possibly drop a curse word, and then you will have your people. So we did that song together. It went really well. I made it into the second part. Then my second song someone had already done. What was going on? It's hard to explain how much of a faux pas this is in the live band karaoke world, but it would be like if Chris got up here and gave a sermon that you literally just heard from someone else last week. That would never happen. So I got up there to do my second song, and I just knew, because the other person had been amazing. There was no way I could do this song better than them. So I did what a Unitarian Universalist should always do. I invited everyone up with me. So I just said, anyone who is sing, anybody who wants to sing, everybody come up on stage with me, and we're going to do this song together. So everybody came up. There were guys with taking their shirts off. There was a guy with a Texas tattoo and flinging his shirt, and it was amazing. And it was community. It was community, it was community, it was community. There was nothing I could do by myself. No matter how talented a musician or performer, or if I had been confident or not, if my body had been perfect or not, spoiler, there's no perfect. But there was nothing I could do that a community couldn't do more powerfully together. And it was amazing. And so Anthony Bourdain said afterwards, I went back and I saw in the article, the quote that I used from him in the third paragraph, he said, "You believe it, you made me believe it, 10. And so that is something that I want to pass on to y'all, that as we support each other in community, when someone is losing faith, when someone is having a very hard time, what are the ways that we can invite each other to believe together, to show up together, to barn raise together, to help someone feel like their wildflower can grow and flourish here? And so I want us to be the kind of people who can look at each other and say, you believed it, you made me believe it, 10. So I share that little tidbit with you. But what I also want to share with you is that I come to you with a lot on my heart. I believe that naming is a sacred act, and I'm going to name some things that are hard in my life and in my family's life and in my friends' lives, and I'm going to share some resources for dealing with those things, because I know we're not alone in what we're dealing with. And I want to remember that Anthony Bourdain was more than a person who died by suicide. I don't know what he was going through that night. He could have been having a really good night. Life, you are not the one thing that happens to you in your life. You are many, many, many parts of your life. And he brought great joy, as so many of us do, to different people's lives, even though he may have been struggling with something really hard as well. So a book that we read in seminary is called Not Alone, Reflections on Faith and Depression by Monica Coleman. She's a Black womanist theologian, Christian, and does a lot of writing around depression and mental health, and I think her books are just wonderful. I can't recommend them highly enough. And so this book that she has, Not Alone, it's a daily devotional. Very short pieces that you can just read in a minute or two. When I was reading it on my Kindle, you would start a new chapter and it would say, you have 1 minute left in this chapter, which is so reassuring, right? When you're having a hard time, if you can't even unpack the boxes in your apartment, do you really want to read a super long chapter about how to get through your depression? No, let's read one page and feel successful. So here's a piece that she writes. She says, depression is a part of my life whether I tell anyone or not. Whether I hide it or not, I'm terrified. I'm afraid of being called crazy. I'm an academic. I make a living off my mind, and my mind can play deathly tricks on me. She says, I'm a minister. I tell people that God loves them and wants the best for them. The truth is that depression can make you question everything, especially whether God loves you. I am mortally afraid of talking about it, yet I will. And I do that because I share her words there. I think it's important that we listen to people who are directly struggling with the things that we're talking about. And I believe that naming is a sacred act. We see that in all of our scriptural texts, whatever denomination or background we're from, that importance of naming. And so with that in mind, and with our Unitarian Universalist principle of the inherent worth and dignity of every person, of interconnectedness, I want to name some of the ways that mental health struggles show up in my own large, glorious, fun, challenging family. We have depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD, alcoholism, eating disorders, suicide, personality disorders. And these are people and ones that I love, a family I wouldn't trade. And we, like I said, we know joy, we know peace, we know laughter, and it's also really, really hard. And I don't doubt that so many of you have some, when you think about your extended family, and maybe it's your family in this church room, who share some of those. And so I'm only telling stories today that are public domain, because each person's mental health story is theirs to decide to tell or not. But I do want to invite us, as you use, to be as open as we can be about talking about what we're dealing with, because it doesn't just affect the one person, it affects the whole family for sure. And I'm trusting us, as you use, to think about this in the context of our faith, that we're really called to show up for each other. In the Not Alone book, Monica Coleman, one of the things she does is she follows each chapter with a question or questions to think about. And some of my favorite ones that she shares are, who in your life can handle your truth? And it feels good to say that I believe you to be a people who can handle my truth. And I believe that you can ask yourselves, who in this room can really handle my own individual stories? Another one is, what songs express how you feel? And that's why music is so important to me in church, really thinking about those calls for comfort me, to be one, to think about where we grow. So I want to give you a couple of hopeful nuggets. Did anybody see the Mr. Rogers movie, the documentary? God, it was so good. It was so good. If you get a chance to somehow do like a showing of the Mr. Rogers documentary at church, I'd highly recommend it. Or have a field trip, invite some friends from the community, go see it. So I think it was called Won't You Be My Neighbor, maybe? Yeah, it was so good. And in that movie, they show a clip where Mr. Rogers is talking to Lady Aberlin about how he's feeling. And I should go back and I should say, Fred Rogers' wife talked about how he was depressed after his retirement. He missed the community of the show. They had really built a community around the show, and he missed that purpose, that getting up every day to make this show. And he was a minister. I didn't know that either. So this was his community ministry, the Mr. Rogers Show. He was teaching people with that. It was amazing. And so I would say, think about your own life and like what part of your life can be a community ministry to others. Where can you open yourself up? And so what this episode, Fred Rogers confesses to Daniel Tiger, or no, he is Daniel Tiger, sorry. Daniel Tiger is the puppet that was kind of Mr. Rogers' avatar. Do you remember him? It's a little tiger puppet. And he says to her, "Often I wonder if I'm a mistake. I'm not supposed to be scared, am I? Sometimes I cry and sometimes I shake, wondering, isn't it true that the strong never break? I'm not like anyone else I know. I'm not like anyone else I know." And so the thing that gets me about that song is those last lines, I'm not like anyone else I know. If there's ever someone who's dealing with those feelings of they're a mistake, they're crying, something is not right, and they feel like they're the only one that feels that way, we are failing as a religion, as a community. Nobody ever, ever, ever should have to think that it's unusual to feel that way. We all feel that way sometimes. And we need to create spaces and relationships where it's okay to say that. And so here's what Lady Aberlin does. She does not say to Daniel Tiger, I have felt that way too. Let me tell you a story about me. No. And she doesn't say, you shouldn't feel that way. You're great. Don't worry about it. Don't feel that way at all. She reassures him, but she doesn't say no to his feelings. What she does is she says, I really must tell you, I do like the person that you're becoming. You're my friend. Quiet or shaking or dreaming or breaking, there's no one mistaking it. You are my friend. And then the even next better thing that happens, and please remember this, Daniel Tiger doesn't say, okay, well, everything's cool now. You fixed me. We're not here to fix each other. What they do is they both keep singing their verse. They both keep singing, and it becomes a duet. Their verses just coming together. It's just so beautiful, and the way life is. It's one fancy dancing boot and one broken leg at the same time. It's singing those songs together, being there for each other, being present, knowing that all of this is possible. It's being consumed by depression and being a light in people's lives, taking them all around the world, hosting karaoke contests. Like, we are all of this, and that's okay. That's being human. So I love that they sing that together. Another person to remember if you're ever struggling is that Abraham Lincoln struggled. There's a book called Lincoln's Melancholy, struggled mightily, and there were friends who slept overnight with him just to get him through the night sometimes. And if you are one of those people who needs a friend to sleep through the night with you, that's okay. That is one way of being human, and we celebrate the worth and dignity of all people. And if you are someone who can sleep over with a friend to get them through the night, please do. That is an incredible way to serve and to just be a friend. I have so much material on this topic, but I know that we're not going to stay here all day, so I'm gonna think about for a moment what kind of the last things I really want to say to you before we move along, and then I'll just promise you that I'll come back and we'll talk more another time. Okay. I want you to know these things. When the rash of suicides happened in the public eye, there were a lot of posts. A lot of us made posts. Reach out when you're struggling. Here's the phone number for the hotline. And the message that I got back from a lot of my people who struggle was that sort of starts to feel like thoughts and prayers. And it stung for just a second because that wasn't my intent. And then you receive that information and you go, you know what? I hear you. And Monica Coleman talks in her book, she says, I want to be responsible for reaching out when I'm struggling. I want to make a practice of telling people that I'm struggling, and I want people to notice who's not there. She says, who's not writing? Who's not posting on Facebook? Who's not coming to church? I want people to notice, because it can't all fall to the people who are in what she calls the dark or sunken place, you know? So I ask you to think about that in your own lives day to day. Who's suddenly not on Facebook who used to be very vibrant there? Or who's not around, who's not taking their dog for a walk? And reach out when you can. We'll take that community responsibility for reaching out. Another thing that I want to share is that there was a study that showed that when people who were going to jump off the Golden Gate Bridge were interrupted and they didn't get to do that attempt, 94% of them lived on, did not commit suicide. 94%. And so there's so much to be said for that reaching out, for that connecting with people during hard times. The study found that opportunity was a part of it. I want to say this, though, about the other 6%. This is really hard on the family. We have a suicide in my family. It's really hard on the family. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. We do what we can. And still, I want you to know that it's not your fault. The life is very complicated. I want to leave you with something joyful, though. I really, really want to describe better for you the barn raising that happened, that was shared over Twitter. I didn't want to tell too much of it in front of the kids, but it sounded like the best party ever. There were pictures of people in this woman's apartment putting this apartment together. They had their beers. They had a laptop with pizza on top of it, and people were looking sharp and laughing, and they were having so much fun. And that is the piece that I really want us to remember. There's a lot of struggle in the world. Come back to the joy always of relationship, the joy of community. Yes, we're going to have some songs to honor the sadness, and we're going to rock out, and we're going to think about the joyful things too. Build into your lives. One of the things Monica Coleman asked for is laughter. She said there was a part in the Bible that said Jesus wept. Where's Jesus laughed? We're going to have to put that in, okay? We're going to need to build laughter and joy and sense of humor into our lives as much as we can, because you don't know when the hard times are going to come. You don't know when there's going to be grief. So please, even as I'm asking you to share with each other the hard times in your life, please make a practice of sharing all the joy. Don't think, oh, I don't want to rub it in that I got that new job, or I don't want to tell so-and-so that this great thing happened because they might not be happy for me. Be happy for each other and celebrate all of those good times too. We need each other. We need each other. We need each other. Be that kind of barn-raising community that I already know you are, which is why I love to be here. Thank you.